The Unfiltered Human on the Fringe, episode 31, Mirror, Mirror. Seeing ourselves through others. Welcome back to the Unfiltered Human on the Fringe, the space where we sit with the raw, the tender, and the complicated parts of being human. Across the last 3 arcs, we've travelled through different landscapes together. In shadow emotions, we faced what we often try to bury: envy, lust, anger, shame, guilt, apathy, and control. In integration and alchemy, we asked what comes after the shadow, how pain can be turned into power, and how a fractured self begins to weave itself back together. And in Ashes to Architecture, the rebuild, we explored the slow, deliberate work of reconstructing a life with stronger foundations and truer walls. Now we open a new chapter: Mirrors, Bridges, and Boundaries. This arc explores the fragile, powerful spaces between self and other. We'll move through intimacy, tension, belonging, and departure, asking what it means to meet, resist, and be changed by connection without losing ourselves in the process. This first episode, Mirror, Mirror, Seeing Ourselves Through Others, looks at how relationships don't just connect us, they also reflect us. Sometimes they show us the truth, sometimes distortion, and sometimes they reveal things about ourselves we didn't even know we were hiding. So whether you've been here from the very beginning or you're just arriving now, welcome. You're stepping into a conversation about the most human of mirrors, the ones we find in each other. Let's begin. Mirror, mirror, seeing ourselves through others' relationships are reflective. Sometimes they show us a clearer image of who we are, and sometimes they warp it. The work is learning to tell which is which, and choosing responses that honor your integrity without dehumanizing anyone else. This part explores self-knowledge, projection, and compassionate boundaries, with an emphasis on staying open while staying rooted. Themes and attributes: self-differentiation, holding your sense of self steady even when others disagree. Discernment, noticing when feedback is a helpful mirror versus a distorted lens. Compassionate boundaries, respecting others' perspectives without adopting them. Integration, welcoming both masculine and feminine qualities within yourself. The Hall of Mirrors, imagine walking into a hall of mirrors. A few panes show a faithful reflection, steady, recognizable. Others stretch or compress the image, exaggerating one feature while minimizing another. If you didn't know you were in a funhouse, you might believe the distortions were the real you. Relationships can feel like that. Some people reflect your strengths and blind spots with care, helping you see more truth. Others, often unintentionally, project their fears and beliefs onto you, and the reflection gets skewed. The task isn't to smash the mirrors or avoid them entirely. It's to learn which ones to trust, which to question, and how to keep your footing as you move among them. Personal reflection. For me, this hasn't always been easy to recognize at the moment. Looking back, there was a time when I was questioning my sense of sexuality. I noticed that someone close to me had very vocal opinions against homosexuality. Spending time with them stirred something unsettled in me, not because I shared their views, but because their discomfort made me reflect on my own. I've always believed people should live and love as they choose. While there are things I may not personally resonate with, at the core, I respect others' right to be who they are. I don't label myself as bisexual. I see myself as a masculine man seeking connection with feminine women. But being around this individual raised questions. Am I fully comfortable with myself, or am I being pulled to adopt their stance just to keep harmony? What I came to see was a kind of cognitive dissonance. The unease wasn't truly mine. It was their judgment pressing against me, layered with the subtle pressure to align with them. Through deeper self-work, I grew more at ease with who I am and more willing to embrace both masculine and feminine aspects within me. That's been hard work, but it's also what's helped me feel more whole. The bigger lesson was this: when someone's words or energy unsettles you, it often says more about them than it does about you. Their feelings belong to them. My responsibility is to understand my own, to stand steady in what I believe, and to meet others with respect without needing to mirror their discomfort. Psychological insight psychologists have long described how relationships act as mirrors, but not always reliable ones. Projection, for example, is when someone attributes their feelings or conflicts to another person. Freud described it as a defense mechanism, and it often shows up subtly. A person who is uncomfortable with their desires or identity may see that discomfort in others and criticize it there instead. Spending time around that kind of projection can make you feel as though the discomfort is yours, even when it isn't. Closely tied to this is cognitive dissonance, Festinger 1957, the unease we feel when holding two conflicting beliefs at once. In my case, I knew I believed in respecting people's freedom to love who they wish. But at the same time, I felt the weight of someone else's opposing view pressing on me, creating inner tension. That tension is what dissonance feels like, and unless we pause to reflect, we often reduce it by unconsciously leaning toward the stronger external voice. Another helpful frame is self-differentiation, a concept from Murray Bowen's family systems theory. Differentiation is the ability to stay emotionally connected to others without losing your sense of self. When differentiation is low, we either fuse with others' opinions or cut off to avoid tension. When it's higher, we can hear someone else's view, acknowledge the discomfort, and remain grounded in our values. For me, learning to integrate both masculine and feminine qualities was part of raising that differentiation. By owning the spectrum within myself, I became less reactive to someone else's judgments. Their mirror no longer defined me. It became one reflection among many, one I could choose to question rather than absorb. Insight prompts. Whose reflections do you tend to accept without questioning? Where in your life do you notice the discomfort of cognitive dissonance? How do you know when a reflection is truly about you and when it's a projection from someone else? Which mirrors in your life help you see yourself more clearly? Theory in action, the 3-mirror practice 1. True mirror. Write down in your own words how you see yourself right now, your values, your identity, your direction. 2. Trusted mirror. Ask one grounded person you respect to share what they see in your strengths, blind spots, and growth edges. 3. Distorted mirror. Identify one relationship or environment where you feel pressured to conform. Write down what is being projected onto you and how you usually react. Keep these 3 mirrors side by side. When confusion rises, return to your true mirror first, then decide how much weight to give the others. This keeps you rooted in your center rather than lost in distortion. When reflections distort, not every reflection we receive from others is clear. Sometimes it's like looking into a warped mirror, one that bends reality, magnifies flaws, or projects shadows that don't belong to us. Relationships can be powerful teachers, but they can also cloud our sense of self if we mistake someone else's projection for truth. This part explores how distortions show up, how we internalize them, and the importance of learning to tell the difference between what is ours and what belongs to them. Themes and attributes projection. When someone casts their unresolved feelings onto you, making you carry what isn't yours. Distortion. How others' perceptions can reshape your self-image in ways that may not be accurate. Discernment. Developing the ability to filter what is useful feedback from what is misplaced judgment. Self-validation. Grounding your worth in inner clarity rather than external opinions. Funhouse mirrors. Think of walking through a carnival funhouse. Each mirror reflects something different. One makes you taller, one makes you wider, one exaggerates a feature until it looks absurd. None of these mirrors is accurate, but if you stared at them long enough without looking elsewhere, you might start to believe that's you. In life, people can become like those mirrors. Their reactions, comments, and judgments are often shaped more by their fears and insecurities than by who we truly are. If we accept their reflection without question, we risk carrying distortions as if they were reality. Personal reflection. I've been in situations where someone's opinion of me was so strong that it almost drowned out my sense of self. They would interpret my actions through their lens, assuming motives that weren't there, or criticizing choices that felt right for me. At the time, I second-guessed myself constantly, wondering if they were right, and I just couldn't see it. Looking back, I can see how much of that was their projection, their discomfort finding a surface in me to land on. The hardest part wasn't hearing their distortion. It was recognizing how easily I started to adopt it as truth. It made me realize how essential it is to step back to ask, is this mine? Or am I holding someone else's shadow as if it belongs to me? Psychological insight Carl Jung, 1951, famously described projection as the transfer of one's unacceptable qualities to others. In psychological terms, projection is a defense mechanism, a way of avoiding self-confrontation by locating unwanted traits in someone else. The danger arises when we, as the recipient, unconsciously accept these projections and allow them to shape our self-concept. Cognitive psychology also warns of the looking-glass self, Cooley 1902, the idea that we form our identity, partly through how we believe others see us. While this can help us build social awareness, it also makes us vulnerable to distortion. If we're surrounded by warped mirrors, our self-perception can become just as warped. Learning discernment means creating a kind of filter. Feedback and reflections can be valuable, but only when they align with inner truth and lived experience. The more grounded we are in self-knowledge, the easier it becomes to spot the difference between a reflection that clarifies and one that distorts. Insight prompts. Can you recall a time when someone projected their feelings onto you? How did it affect your self-view? How do you usually tell the difference between helpful feedback and distorted judgment? Where in your life could you benefit from trusting your reflection more than someone else's? Theory in action. This week, try a simple mirror exercise. The next time you receive criticism, judgment, or even praise, pause and ask yourself, does this feel like it resonates with who I know myself to be? Or does it feel more like their reflection than my reality? Write down your answer. Over time, this practice helps you spot distortions quickly and strengthens your ability to hold on to your true reflection. When mirrors clarify, not all mirrors distort. Some catch us at just the right angle, reflecting a truth we didn't know we were ready to see. These moments can be uncomfortable, but they can also be catalysts for growth. The right reflection, even when challenging, can become a gift, a way of seeing ourselves more clearly than we could alone. Themes and attributes truth-telling reflections, encounters where others reveal something we hadn't yet faced in ourselves. Constructive discomfort, the tension between defensiveness and transformation when confronted with truth. Mutual honesty, relationships that hold up the mirror with care, not cruelty. Self-integration, taking what is useful from reflection and making it part of a more whole self. The mirror you don't expect. Imagine standing in front of a mirror that doesn't flatter you. Instead of the carefully lit reflection you're used to, this one is harsh, showing every detail. At first, you might want to look away to find a kinder light. However, staying with it and noticing what is there can be a turning point. The mirror doesn't lie, it simply refuses to soften the edges. Life has ways of putting these kinds of mirrors in front of us, often through people we least expect. A passing comment, a disagreement, or even a look can suddenly show us something we've been avoiding. When received with openness, these moments can shift us in ways private reflection rarely does. Personal reflection. There was a time I had a close friend who told me, gently but firmly, that I had a habit of withdrawing whenever conflict arose. At first, I wanted to defend myself, to say I was just trying to avoid unnecessary drama. But sitting with it, I realized they were right. My instinct to step back wasn't always about peace. It was often about fear. I didn't want to risk being misunderstood or disliked, so I defaulted to silence. Hearing that truth wasn't easy. It stung because it touched a tender place, my discomfort with confrontation. But the sting gave me something invaluable, awareness. It was a mirror I couldn't unsee, and while it took time to work with, I began recognizing the moments when my withdrawal was more about self-protection than genuine choice. That awareness has changed how I approach difficult conversations today. Psychological insight psychologically, these moments connect to the idea of constructive feedback loops in relationships. Research on interpersonal dynamics, e.g., Johari window model, Loft and Ingham, 1955, suggests that there are aspects of ourselves we remain blind to until someone else reflects them. These blind spots can't always be uncovered in isolation. They need another person's perspective to come into view. Of course, not all reflections are accurate, and not all are given with care. That's why trust and relational safety matter. A friend's honest observation can land as an invitation to grow, while the same words from a critic might only deepen shame. The difference lies in whether the mirror is held with respect. For me, that friend's feedback became a bridge between who I thought I was and who I could be. It showed me that my patterns weren't fixed. They were behaviors I could notice, question, and choose differently from. That's the gift of a clarifying mirror. It doesn't just reveal, it expands the possibilities of who we are becoming. Insight prompts. When has someone reflected a truth to you that you weren't ready to see? How do you tell the difference between a reflection that is helpful and one that is harmful? What mirrors in your life right now are showing you something uncomfortable, but potentially clarifying? Theory in action this week. Ask for a reflection from someone you trust. Choose a person who cares about your growth and invite them to share one thing they see in you that you may not see in yourself. Resist the urge to defend or explain, just listen. Notice your first reaction and then sit with it for a few days. Sometimes the most transformative mirrors are the ones we deliberately choose to look into. Distorted reflections. Not every mirror tells the truth. Some warp what they show us, bending reality into shapes that leave us questioning ourselves. These reflections often come through the projections of others, their insecurities, judgments, or unprocessed past onto us as if it were our own. Learning to tell the difference between a clarifying mirror and a distorted one is vital if we're to hold on to a grounded sense of self. Themes and attributes, projection and distortion, how others' unresolved struggles can reflect as misleading images of who we are. Energetic influence, the subtle ways another's beliefs or discomfort can seep into our self-perception. Discernment of reflection, developing the ability to tell what belongs to us and what belongs to them. Inner anchor, holding fast to our self-knowledge when others try to make their truth our reality. Unhouse mirrors of the soul. Think of walking through a hall of mirrors at a carnival. Some make you appear taller, others shorter, and some stretch your face into grotesque caricatures. None of them reflects your actual form, yet if you were to linger too long in that space, you might start to believe the distortions. Relationships can function in the same way. Someone else's fear, prejudice, or self-criticism can be projected onto us, warping the way we see ourselves. Unless we're aware of the distortion, we risk internalizing it as truth. Personal reflection. There was a period when I noticed how differently some people behaved depending on who was in the room. Around one person, they would act supportive, friendly, even generous, and around another, they would shift into criticism, gossip, or indifference. At times it felt as if they were wearing masks, adjusting themselves to fit whatever image served them in that moment. Watching this unsettled me. I don't talk behind people's backs, and I don't want to be two-faced, yet being in that environment made me reflect. Do I ever do this too, even unconsciously? Am I always as consistent as I believe myself to be? It was confronting, because part of me realized that while I might not gossip, there were moments where I stayed quiet rather than speak honestly, moments where my mask was silence. Their distortion became a mirror that forced me to check my integrity. What I learned was that other people's masks don't have to make me cynical or reactive, but they can invite me to be more accountable. Their inconsistency showed me the value of living in alignment, of saying the same thing whether someone is present or not. And once I grounded myself in that commitment, the distorted mirror lost its power. Psychological insight. Distorted reflections often stem from projection theory. Freud, 1894, where individuals displace feelings they cannot face within themselves onto others. But another layer comes from social masking, the learned behavior of altering our presentation depending on context or company. While adaptive at times, masks can easily slide into inauthenticity, leaving relationships built on shifting sands rather than truth. For those who value integrity, being in the presence of masks can feel deeply disorienting. Psychologist Carl Rogers spoke about congruence, the alignment between inner experience and outward expression, as a foundation for genuine relationships. When we encounter incongruence in others, it can trigger self-doubt or mistrust. Yet it also allows us to reaffirm our commitment to congruence, to ensure we are living in alignment even if others are not. In my experience, recognizing masks in others forced me to examine my quiet places of misalignment. The lesson wasn't to police others, but to strengthen my anchor. If I speak truthfully and consistently, the distortions of others lose their grip on me. Insight prompts. Can you recall a time when you noticed someone wearing a mask, behaving differently depending on who was around? Did that reflection make you question your consistency? If so, what did you discover? What practices help you stay congruent, even when others shift their masks? Theory in action. This week, practice congruence. Choose one interaction where you would normally stay quiet or soften your words, and instead respectfully speak your truth. Afterwards, reflect. Did it strengthen your sense of integrity? Notice how it feels to hold your ground without slipping into silence or masks. Mirrors we avoid. Some mirrors are so uncomfortable that we learn to walk past them without looking. They're the ones that show us traits we dislike, wounds we haven't healed, or truths we'd rather keep in shadow. Avoidance feels easier, but the longer we refuse to face those mirrors, the more distorted and threatening they seem. Themes and attributes: avoidance and denial. The instinct to look away from reflections that reveal pain or imperfection. Shadow confrontation, acknowledging the parts of ourselves we'd rather disown. Growth through discomfort, understanding that the mirrors we resist often hold the keys to transformation. Radical honesty, building the courage to see ourselves as we are, not only as we wish to be. The darkened glass, imagine a mirror covered in dust in the corner of a room. You know it's there, but you don't want to wipe it clean because you're afraid of what you might see. Yet every time you pass by, you feel its presence. Avoidance doesn't make it disappear, it only makes it loom larger. This is how unexamined patterns, emotions, or flaws function in our lives. The more we turn away, the more power they gain in the background. Only when we stop, face them, and truly look do we begin to reclaim that power. Personal reflection. There was a time in my life when anger was a mirror I avoided, but it manifested in difficult times, unintentionally. Growing up, I'd seen anger expressed destructively, leaving hurt and division in its wake. So I learned early to suppress mine, to keep it hidden even from myself. For years, I equated anger with danger, but avoiding that mirror came at a cost. My silence in conflict wasn't always peace, it was repression. Situations would leave me feeling small, overlooked, or dismissed, yet I'd swallow the words rather than risk showing anger. On the surface, I appeared calm, but inside, I carried a slow burn that eventually turned into resentment. It wasn't until later, through reflection and self-work, that I realized anger wasn't inherently destructive. Avoiding it had kept me from seeing its truer face, a mirror showing me where my boundaries were being crossed, or where I was denying myself a voice. Facing that mirror was uncomfortable, but it revealed that beneath the rage was a call for self-respect. Psychological insight psychologist Carl Jung described the shadow as the collection of traits we disown or repress, often because they clash with our self-image. Anger, vulnerability, selfishness, and even desire can end up banished into the shadows. But what is repressed doesn't vanish, it leaks out in disguised or unhealthy ways. Research on emotion suppression, Gross and Levinson, in 1997, shows that avoiding emotions increases stress responses rather than reducing them. The mirror avoided still shapes us, only in unconscious ways. By contrast, confronting uncomfortable reflections builds what psychologists call emotional integration, the ability to acknowledge, regulate, and learn from every part of ourselves. In my experience, avoidance created the illusion of control, but left me fragmented. Facing the anger I feared didn't turn me into someone I didn't want to be. Instead, it gave me a tool, the ability to recognize when a situation was crossing my limits, and to respond consciously rather than explosively. Insight prompts. Which emotions or traits feel like mirrors you'd rather avoid? How has avoidance shaped your relationships or self-perception? What small step could you take to face one of those mirrors with curiosity instead of fear? Theory in action this week. Choose one avoided mirror, an emotion, pattern, or memory you tend to push aside. Write down what you fear it might reveal about you. Then reframe it as information. What boundary, need, or value might this reflection be pointing to? Notice how naming the truth softens the fear. The healing mirror. Reflections that restore, not every reflection unsettles us. Some arrive as unexpected gifts, moments where another person's gaze, words, or presence reveals something good, something whole, that we had forgotten or never recognized in ourselves. These are the healing mirrors, and though they may be fleeting, they can leave an imprint that lasts a lifetime. The healing mirror doesn't erase wounds or bypass reality. Instead, it reflects the possibility of wholeness even in our brokenness. It shows us resilience when all we feel is exhaustion, or dignity when shame has dulled our vision. The challenge is learning to receive these reflections without dismissing them, to let them take root instead of brushing them aside. Themes and attributes affirmation, how the right words or gestures can restore parts of us that feel lost. Belonging, recognizing ourselves in the eyes of those who see us. Resonance, feeling when a reflection aligns deeply with who we are. Integration, allowing the positive reflection to become part of our inner story. The lamp in the window, think of a dark street late at night, every house quiet, curtains drawn. You're walking with the weight of the day heavy on your shoulders, feeling invisible, when suddenly you pass a single window where a warm lamp glows. It doesn't belong to you, but its light reaches you. For a moment, you feel less alone. The healing mirror works the same way. It might come through a teacher's encouragement, a friend's reassurance, or even a stranger's kindness. The light they hold doesn't remove your struggles, but it reminds you that you're more than them, that your worth isn't extinguished just because you can't see it right now. Personal reflection. There was a time in my life when I was second guessing almost everything about myself, my choices, my direction, even the way I related to people. I remember a conversation with someone I respected, who looked me in the eye and said, "You don't realize how strong you are, do you?" At the time, I wanted to brush it off. Strong wasn't how I felt. I felt uncertain, even weak. But their words stayed with me. Over time, I realized they had seen something I couldn't yet acknowledge. The way I kept showing up, kept asking questions, kept refusing to give in to despair. That reflection slowly helped me rewrite how I saw myself. It taught me that sometimes we need to borrow someone else's mirror until we can build our own. And it made me more mindful of the power we all carry to reflect strength and worth back to others when they've forgotten it themselves. Psychological insight. In psychology, this is closely linked to positive mirroring in attachment theory, Winnicott, 1967. Healthy relationships, especially early in life, involve caregivers reflecting a child's emotions in a way that validates and soothes them. When this doesn't happen consistently, we grow into adults who struggle to see ourselves. But healing mirrors later in life can repair that gap, offering corrective emotional experiences. There's also evidence from social reflection studies, Marcus and Worth, 1987, showing that our self-concept evolves not only from within, but through the feedback we internalize from others. While negative reflections can distort us, affirming reflections can become anchors of resilience, particularly during vulnerable times. What stands out to me personally is how resistant I was to receiving positive reflections. It felt uncomfortable, almost undeserved. But psychology shows that this resistance is common. People with histories of shame or self-doubt often have what's called a positivity filter, downplaying affirmations while magnifying criticism. Beck, 1976. Learning to accept the healing mirror is, in itself, an act of courage. Insight prompts. Who in your life has acted as a healing mirror, showing you something good about yourself you couldn't see at the time? How do you usually respond when someone reflects affirmation or strength? Do you take it in or push it away? Where might you offer that kind of healing mirror to someone else in your world? Theory in action. This week, try a simple experiment. When someone offers you a compliment, affirmation, or encouragement, resist the urge to downplay it. Instead, pause, breathe, and let it land. Repeat it back to yourself later, almost like planting a seed. Notice how it feels to carry that reflection with you, not as something to prove, but as something to remember. The shadow mirror. What we deny in ourselves. Not all mirrors are flattering. Some reflections cut deep, confronting us with the parts of ourselves we'd rather deny or hide. These shadow mirrors can feel like accusations, but they're also invitations to integrate the pieces of us we've pushed into the dark. The shadow mirror shows up when we react strongly to qualities in others: arrogance, neediness, anger, or even joy. Sometimes what we despise in another person is what we fear in ourselves. Other times, what we admire but dismiss, confidence, ease, vulnerability, is a part of us waiting to be reclaimed. The key is not to confuse the mirror with the person holding it. Aims and attributes projection, disowning a part of ourselves and seeing it exaggerated in someone else. Emotional triggers, recognizing the heat of reaction as a signal of unintegrated parts. Integration, bringing shadow aspects into awareness so they no longer rule us unconsciously. Compassionate honesty, meeting our denied parts without shame, but with curiosity and responsibility. Personal reflection. I remember a time when I noticed myself becoming deeply frustrated with someone in my circle at college, who was often loud, forceful, and quick to dominate a space. I found myself irritated almost immediately whenever they walked into the room. For a while, I framed it as their problem. They were arrogant, egotistical, and inconsiderate, and unwilling to make space for others. But when I sat with it, I realized my reaction was carrying more weight than the situation justified. What was it in me that flared up so sharply? Over time, I recognized that I too had a strong voice, one I often suppressed out of fear of being too much, or being thought of as silly, not able to hold others' attention. I'd learned to keep quiet to avoid conflict or judgment. Seeing someone else unapologetically take up space mirrored the part of me I'd buried. It wasn't arrogance I hated, it was my own disowned confidence. That recognition was uncomfortable, but it shifted something. Instead of only seeing their flaws, I began to ask myself, what part of me is waiting to be expressed? It didn't mean I had to approve of their behavior, but it did mean I could reclaim my voice without turning my irritation into a constant battle with someone else. Psychological insight Carl Jung described the shadow as the unconscious aspects of the self, the traits, emotions, and impulses we repress because they conflict with our self-image. Jung, 1951. When left unexamined, these shadows don't disappear, they project outward. We see them reflected in others, often with disproportionate intensity. This process, known as projection, Freud 1894, elaborated by Jung, allows us to externalize what we cannot yet face internally. If I judge someone as weak, it may be because I fear my vulnerability. If I admire someone's bravery but dismiss it as unattainable, it may be a reflection of courage lying dormant within me. Recognizing the shadow mirror doesn't mean excusing harmful behavior in others. It means asking, what part of me is this stirring, and what does that part need? By shifting from blame to curiosity, we move towards integration, a state where both light and dark parts of us can coexist without needing to be hidden or projected. In my journey, naming the shadow has often transformed relationships. When I understood that my irritation with arrogance was really about my silenced confidence, the charge began to dissolve. I could respond to the person in front of me with clearer boundaries, while also reclaiming a forgotten strength in myself. Insight prompts. What qualities in others trigger the strongest reactions in you, either dislike or admiration? Could these be reflections of traits you've repressed, denied, or undervalued in yourself? How might acknowledging these parts change the way you respond? Theory in action. Next time you feel triggered by someone's behavior, pause before reacting. Write down 3 adjectives that describe what frustrates or fascinates you about them. Then ask yourself, where does this live in me? Even if it feels small or hidden, name the part of yourself that resonates with that quality. Notice how this reframes the mirror, not as a weapon pointed at you, but as a tool for integration. The goal isn't to become that person, but to reclaim the parts of you that deserve space in your own story. The inner mirror. The mirrors we meet in others aren't always clean or flattering. Some reflect our strength, others our shadows, and some distort us entirely. What matters isn't chasing perfect reflections, but learning which ones invite us into deeper honesty with ourselves. Not everyone will show you back something you want to see, and not everyone deserves the power to shape how you see yourself. The work is in noticing the difference, in holding what resonates, and gently setting down what doesn't belong to you. At the end of the day, The most reliable mirror is the one you build within, the part of you that knows your truth, even when others project theirs onto you. And when you can carry that inner mirror with clarity, every reflection you encounter becomes less about threat and more about growth. You've been listening to The Unfiltered Human on the Fringe. Until next time, stay human, stay awake, and trust the mirrors that bring you closer to wholeness. James Miller. If you found value in today's episode, you may also be interested in my broader project, The Inversiverse, a series exploring the hidden architecture of perception, identity, control, and consciousness. Across 20 episodes, The Inversiverse dissects indoctrination, language, media manipulation, dark psychology, belief systems, and the evolution of self in the digital age. You can find all episodes of The Inversiverse on Facebook, YouTube, Rumble, and Substack by searching this place called Earth. These ideas aren't shared to convince you, but to invite you to think, feel, and perceive more consciously in a world designed to keep you distracted. Overview of The Inversiverse, a journey through the mirrors of mind, culture, and control. Episodes 1 to 3 introduce foundational ideas around indoctrination, perception, and manipulation. Episode 4 explores how language, symbols, and cultural norms are used to shape thought. Episode 5 investigates control systems, media narratives, and the illusion of choice. Episodes 6 to 7 dives into collective belief structures and the psychology of mass behaviour. Episode 8 focuses on marketing, control theory, game theory, and critical thinking. Episode 9 covers love, relationships, human mating, gender dynamics, and red-blue pill ideologies. Episode 10 unpacks dark psychology, the occult, Satanism, and the dark triad personality types. Episode 11 The Simulated Self examines identity, ego, and the rise of post-human consciousness. Episode 12 The Spell of the Mind inquires into language, illusion, and physiology of thought. Episode 13 Conscious Seduction, Journeys through Persuasion, Propaganda, and the Unseen Forces of the Mind. Episode 14 The Myth of Sanity sheds light on madness, genius, and the edge of perception. Episode 15 The Algorithmic Mind probes influence, identity, and invisible architects. Episode 16 The Noise of Knowing reveals overload, obsession, and the age of infinite information. Episode 17 Belief Machines delves further into language, desire, and the engine of reality. Episode 18 Submerged Signals examines how the unseen shapes the self. Episode 19 The Alchemy Within Traces, Food, Frequency, and the Forgotten Intelligence of the Body. Episode 20 Encoded Flesh scrutinizes and opens up to the forgotten language of the body, DNA, and biological consciousness.